The bridge of the Valiant was quiet except for the soft beeping of computers and the gentle hum of engines. Commander Jack Morrison stood near the main viewport, his hands clasped behind his back, staring at the red planet Mars below them. He had been in space for most of his adult life, but the view never got old. Today, however, he couldn't enjoy it. His mind was too busy worrying about what was coming. "Commander, we're receiving another distress signal from Colony 7, Lieutenant Amy Parker said from her station. Her voice was calm, but Jack could hear the tension underneath. Amy had been with him for 3 years now, and she was one of the best officers he had ever worked with. Jack turned away from the window and walked over to her station. "What are they saying?" Amy pressed a few buttons on her console and a crackling voice filled the bridge. "This is Colony 7. We have visual confirmation of unknown vessels approaching our sector. They match the descriptions from the previous encounters. Requesting immediate assistance." Jack felt his stomach tighten. This was the 5th distress call in 2 weeks. The pattern was clear now. Something was happening out there, something big. "Tell them to evacuate all non-essential personnel and power up their defense systems. We'll get there as fast as we can." "Yes, sir," Amy replied, her fingers moving quickly across her keyboard. Jack had known for months that humanity was being watched. Ever since humans developed faster-than-light travel 20 years ago, strange ships had been spotted at the edges of human space. They never attacked, never communicated, just watched. But recently things had changed. The ships were getting closer and there were more of them. The door to the bridge slid open and Captain Eric Stone walked in. Eric was the commander of the Jupiter Defense Fleet, and he had flown all the way to Mars for this meeting. His face was serious and dark circles under his eyes showed he hadn't been sleeping well. "Jack," Eric said, shaking his hand firmly. "We need to talk." "I know," Jack replied. "Let's go to my office." The two men walked through the corridors of the Valiant until they reached Jack's small office. It wasn't much, just a desk, a few chairs, and a screen on the wall showing star maps. Jack closed the door and gestured for Eric to sit down. "How bad is it?" Jack asked, sitting across from his old friend. Eric leaned back in his chair and rubbed his face with both hands. "It's bad, Jack, really bad. Our long-range sensors picked up something 3 days ago. At first we thought it was a mistake, but we've confirmed it now. There's a fleet coming, a huge fleet. 300 ships, maybe more." Jack felt his blood run cold. 300? "Are you sure?" "Positive. They're still outside the solar system, but they're heading straight for Earth. They'll be here in less than a week." Jack stood up and walked to the window. From here he could see Earth in the distance, a beautiful blue and white marble hanging in the darkness of space. His daughter Sophie was down there, living with her mother in California. She was only 8 years old. The thought of anything happening to her made his chest hurt. "Do we know who they are?" Jack asked quietly. "We think so," Eric said. "We've been analyzing their ship designs and comparing them to our database. They match the descriptions of the Galactic Council. You've heard of them, right?" Jack nodded slowly. Everyone in the military had heard of the Galactic Council. They were a coalition of 12 alien species that controlled a massive portion of the galaxy. According to the few intercepted transmissions humans had decoded, the Council had been around for thousands of years. They were powerful, advanced, and they didn't like surprises. "What do they want?" Jack asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. "We intercepted one of their transmissions this morning," Eric said, pulling out a small datapad. "It took our computers 6 hours to translate it, but we got the message. They're calling it an ultimatum." Jack took the datapad and read the translated message. His hand started shaking as he went through each line. The Council was demanding that humanity surrender immediately. They wanted all human military forces disbanded, all weapons destroyed, and all colonies placed under Council supervision. If humanity refused, the message said, Earth would be destroyed. "They're giving us 72 hours, Eric said softly. "After that, they'll start attacking." Jack put down the datapad and closed his eyes. 72 hours, 3 days to decide the fate of the entire human race. He thought about Sophie again, about her bright smile and the way she laughed when he told her stories about space. He thought about all the billions of people on Earth who had no idea what was coming. "We need to contact President Hughes immediately," Jack said, opening his eyes. "Get me a quantum link to Earth. We need to call a meeting with all the military leaders." Eric nodded and pulled out his communicator. Within minutes, they had established a secure connection to Earth. President Kevin Hughes appeared on the screen in Jack's office, looking tired and worried. Next to him were General Paul Hendricks and Admiral Lisa Carter, two of the highest-ranking military officers in the Human Defense Forces. "Gentlemen, Admiral," Jack said, nodding to each of them, "I assume you've heard about the Council fleet." "We have," President Hughes said. His voice was steady, but Jack could see the fear in his eyes. "We've been in emergency meetings all day trying to figure out what to do. Some of my advisors are saying we should surrender. They think fighting would be suicide." "And what do you think, Mr. President?" Jack asked. Hughes was quiet for a moment, then he looked directly at Jack through the screen. "I think surrender means the end of human freedom. These aliens, they don't see us as equals. They see us as a problem that needs to be controlled. If we give in now, we'll be slaves for the rest of our existence." "Agreed," Admiral Carter said. "But we have to be realistic. 300 ships against our entire fleet. We have maybe 80 combat-ready vessels. The technology gap alone makes this fight nearly impossible." Jack had been thinking about this ever since Eric told him about the fleet. He walked back to his desk and pulled up a tactical display showing the Council's current formation. He had been studying it for the last hour, looking for any weakness, any advantage humanity might have. "Look at their formation," Jack said, pointing to the screen. "They're not expecting a fight. They think we're going to surrender like every other species they've conquered. They're overconfident. You have a plan?" General Hendricks asked, leaning forward. "The beginning of one," Jack admitted. "If we respond to their ultimatum and pretend we're considering surrender, we buy ourselves time. Meanwhile, we mobilize every ship, every weapon, every defense platform we have. We coordinate a simultaneous strike across the entire solar system." "That's insane," one of the other officers said from off-screen. "They'll destroy us." "Maybe," Jack said. "But if we do nothing, we're definitely finished. At least this way we go down fighting. And maybe, just maybe, we hurt them badly enough that they think twice about attacking Earth." President Hughes looked at each of his military leaders, then back at Jack. "Commander Morrison, how long would you need to prepare?" 48 hours minimum," Jack replied. "We'll use the first 24 hours of their ultimatum to stall them. Make them think we're organizing a surrender. Then we use the remaining time to get into position." The president was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "Do it. Get our forces ready. I'll handle the political side and respond to the Council's ultimatum." The meeting ended and the screen went dark. Jack sat alone in his office, the weight of what they were about to do pressing down on him. Eric had left to return to Jupiter and start preparations there. Amy was coordinating with the other ships in the fleet. Everyone was moving, preparing for war. Jack pulled up a photo on his desk computer. It showed him and Sophie at the beach last year during his leave. She was building a sand castle, her hair messy from the ocean wind, grinning at the camera. He touched the screen gently. "I'm sorry, sweetie," he whispered. "I'm going to do everything I can to keep you safe." He stood up and walked back to the bridge. There was work to do and time was running out. In 3 days, humanity would either win its freedom or lose everything. Jack was determined to make sure it was the former. The cameras were positioned perfectly, and the lighting made President Kevin Hughes look calm and presidential. But inside, his heart was racing. He was about to lie to the most powerful force in the galaxy, and if they saw through it, billions of people would die. "Are we ready?" Hughes asked the technician operating the broadcast equipment. "Yes, Mr. President. The signal will reach the Council fleet in approximately 30 seconds. We're broadcasting on all frequencies they've been using." Hughes straightened his tie and took a deep breath. He had practiced this speech a dozen times with his advisors, making sure every word sounded sincere. The goal was simple: make the Council think that humanity was seriously considering surrender while secretly preparing for war. The technician counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1, and the red recording light came on. "This is President Kevin Hughes of Earth, representing the unified government of humanity," he began, keeping his voice steady and diplomatic. "We have received your ultimatum and understand the gravity of the situation. However, we request additional time to discuss your terms with our various colonial governments and organize the logistics of what you're asking. We ask for 48 more hours to prepare our response and coordinate a peaceful transition." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We wish to avoid bloodshed and believe that dialogue is the path forward. Please allow us this additional time to ensure a smooth process for all parties involved. The recording ended and Hughes sat back in his chair, feeling exhausted. Lying went against everything he believed in as a leader, but this was about survival. If humanity was going to have any chance, they needed time. Well done, Mr. President, Admiral Carter said from across the room. That should buy Commander Morrison the time he needs. Hughes nodded, but he didn't feel good about it. Let's hope it works. 8 hours later, the Council's response came through. A holographic image appeared in the command center showing a massive reptilian creature standing over 9 feet tall. Its scales were dark green and its yellow eyes seemed to look right through the humans watching. This was Vorash, the commander of the Council fleet. Your request is noted, President Hughes, Vorash said, his voice deep and rumbling even through the translation software. We grant you 48 additional hours. Use this time wisely. Any attempt at deception or military preparation will result in the immediate destruction of your planet. We have observed species like yours before. You believe yourselves special, unique. You are not. Every civilization we have encountered eventually accepts the wisdom of Council rule. You will be no different. The hologram disappeared and the room fell silent. Vorash's words hung in the air like a threat. Arrogant bastard, General Hendricks muttered. He has no idea what's coming. Hughes hoped that was true. He immediately opened a secure channel to Jack Morrison aboard the Valiant. Commander, you have your 48 hours. Make them count. Across the solar system, humanity burst into action. Jack coordinated with every ship captain, every station commander, every defense platform operator. The message was the same everywhere. Prepare for battle, but stay hidden. The Council was watching, and any obvious military movement would give away the plan. Captain Eric Stone was back at Jupiter, working 18-hour days to get his defense grid ready. The platforms around the gas giant were designed to protect the mining operations and research stations, not to fight a major fleet battle. But Eric was creative. He had his engineers working around the clock to upgrade weapons systems and link all the platforms into a single coordinated network. How much firepower can we generate? Eric asked his chief engineer, a woman named Kate Rogers. Kate looked at her datapad and did some quick calculations. If we link everything together and fire simultaneously, we could take out maybe 10 to 15 enemy ships. But that's it. After the first volley, they'll know where we are and destroy us. One volley might be all we need, Eric said. If we can hurt them badly enough in the first strike, it might throw off their whole formation. Meanwhile, Commander Beth Sullivan was handling one of the most difficult jobs. She was in charge of evacuating civilians from the outer colonies, while secretly arming every ship that could carry a weapon. It was a delicate balance. If they evacuated too obviously, the Council would notice. If they didn't evacuate enough, thousands of civilians would be in the line of fire when the fighting started. Beth stood on the bridge of her ship, the Horizon, watching as another transport vessel loaded up with families from Colony 12. Children were crying, parents were scared, and everyone was asking questions that Beth couldn't answer. She hated lying to them, but operational security was critical. Tell them it's a drill, she instructed her communications officer. Just a precautionary measure because of the Council fleet. Don't mention anything about fighting. The communications officer nodded and started broadcasting the cover story. Beth turned away, feeling sick to her stomach. These people trusted her and she was keeping them in the dark. But if the plan leaked, if even one person told the wrong person about humanity's preparations, the Council would attack immediately. As the transports departed, Beth's crew got to work on the real mission. They took civilian cargo ships and retrofitted them with missile launchers, railguns, and whatever weapons they could scavenge from military stockpiles. The ships wouldn't last long in a real fight, but they might survive long enough to get off a few shots. On Earth, in a secret facility buried deep beneath the Mojave Desert, Dr. Alan Hayes was working on something that could change everything. Alan was a quantum physicist, one of the smartest people in the human military. For years he had been developing theoretical weapons based on advanced physics. Now, with humanity's survival at stake, he had the funding and support to actually build one. The device sitting on the lab table didn't look like much. It was about the size of a small car, covered in cables and cooling units with a strange crystalline core at its center. Alan had been calling it the quantum disruptor, and if his theories were correct, it could tear apart the molecular bonds holding objects together. Will it work? Asked Colonel Danny Fletcher, the military liaison assigned to oversee the project. Alan wiped sweat from his forehead and stared at the device. Honestly, I have no idea. The math says it should work. The simulations say it should work, but we've never actually tested it on anything bigger than a basketball. And you want to use it on an alien spaceship? Not just any spaceship, Alan corrected. Their flagship if possible. The bigger the target, the better the effect should be. In theory, Fletcher looked nervous. And if it doesn't work? Alan shrugged. Then we wasted a lot of time and resources on a very expensive paperweight. But if it does work, we might actually have a chance against the Council's technology. While the scientists and engineers worked on weapons and defenses, Lieutenant Amy Parker made a discovery that changed everything. She was analyzing intercepted Council communications, using the military's best translation software to decode their messages. Most of it was routine stuff, movement orders and status reports, but one message caught her attention. She ran it through the translator 3 times to make sure she was reading it correctly. Then she called Jack immediately. "Commander, you need to see this," she said, her voice shaking slightly. Jack came over to her station and read the translated message on her screen. His face went pale. "Are you sure this translation is accurate?" "I've checked it multiple times, sir. There's no mistake." The message was from Vorash to the Council's High Command. It detailed their plans for Earth after humanity surrendered. But they weren't planning to just control humanity. They were planning to sterilize the entire planet, killing every human being and then repopulate it with a different species that the Council considered more manageable. Jack felt rage building in his chest. They were never going to let us surrender peacefully. This whole ultimatum was just a formality before they committed genocide. "What do we do, sir?" Amy asked. Jack looked around the bridge at his crew. These people had families, lives, dreams. The Council wanted to erase all of that, to erase humanity itself from existence. The decision became clear. We share this intelligence with everyone. Every ship, every commander, every soldier needs to know what we're really fighting for. This isn't about politics or territory anymore. It's survival. Either we win or humanity ends. Amy nodded and started transmitting the message across secure channels. Within hours, every human in the military knew the truth. The effect was remarkable. Morale didn't collapse as some feared. Instead, it strengthened. There was a clarity in knowing exactly what was at stake. No more doubts, no more questions about whether fighting was the right choice. The Council had made it simple: fight or die. Jack watched as reports came in from across the solar system. Eric's Jupiter defense grid was ready. Beth's armed convoy was in position near Neptune. Every military vessel humanity possessed was quietly moving into attack positions, hidden by planets, asteroids, and electronic countermeasures. On Earth, Dr. Alan Hayes loaded his quantum disruptor onto a transport ship. The device was still untested, still theoretical, but it was the best chance they had. The transport launched from the secret facility and headed for orbit, where it would rendezvous with the Valiant. The holographic image of Vorash appeared once more in the command center on Earth. The massive reptilian looked even more imposing than before, his yellow eyes gleaming with confidence. He believed this moment would be another easy victory for the Council, another species brought to heel without a real fight. "President Hughes," Vorash rumbled, his translated voice filling the room. "Your time has expired. Present your formal surrender, and we will begin the transition process." President Kevin Hughes stood up from his chair, straightened his jacket, and looked directly at the hologram. Every human watching, both in the command center and on ships across the solar system, held their breath. This was the moment that would decide everything. "Commander Vorash," Hughes said, his voice clear and strong, "I have consulted with my people, with our military leaders, and with representatives from every human colony. We have discussed your demands carefully and considered all options available to us." Vorash nodded, clearly expecting the words of surrender to follow. "And our answer is no." The hologram flickered as if the Council couldn't believe what they just heard. Vorash's eyes narrowed and his lips pulled back to reveal rows of sharp teeth. "What did you say?" "I said no," Hughes repeated, his voice growing firmer. "Humanity rejects your demands. We reject your authority. We will not surrender our freedom, our sovereignty, or our right to exist as an independent species. If you want to take Earth, you'll have to fight for it." Vorash's roar of rage echoed through the transmission before he cut it off. The hologram disappeared, and Admiral Carter immediately opened channels to every human military asset in the solar system. All units, this is command. Execute Operation Last Stand. I repeat, execute Operation Last Stand. Aboard the Valiant, Jack Morrison had been waiting for those words. He turned to his crew, seeing the fear and determination mixed on their faces. These people knew they might not survive the next few hours, but they were ready to fight anyway. This is it, Jack said calmly. Remember your training. Trust each other. And let's show these aliens what humans are made of. Amy, send the signal. Lieutenant Amy Parker pressed a single button. And across the entire solar system, humanity struck first. Hidden missile platforms around Earth. The Moon and Mars launched simultaneously. Hundreds of missiles streaked through space toward the Council fleet, which was still in its standard occupation formation. The aliens had been so certain of humanity's surrender that they hadn't even raised their defensive shields to full power. The first wave of missiles hit before the Council could react. Massive explosions lit up the darkness of space as 20 Council ships were destroyed in the opening seconds. Debris and atmosphere vented into the vacuum as alien crews scrambled to respond to the unexpected attack. Direct hits confirmed, Amy reported, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. Enemy shields are activating now, but we caught them completely off guard. At Jupiter, Captain Eric Stone watched his tactical display with satisfaction. The Council squadron assigned to watch the outer planets was in chaos, trying to figure out where the attack had come from. That confusion lasted exactly 15 seconds before Eric's defense grid lit them up. Fire all platforms. Concentrated barrage on target cluster Alpha, Eric ordered. The Jupiter defense grid, carefully linked and coordinated over the past 2 days, unleashed a devastating volley. Railgun rounds moving at incredible speeds punched through shields that weren't designed to stop such primitive but effective weapons. 6 Council cruisers exploded in a chain reaction that took out a 7th ship caught in the blast. Yes, Eric shouted, pumping his fist. His crew cheered, but their celebration was short-lived. The surviving Council ships were adapting, bringing their superior technology to bear. Return fire started coming in fast and accurate. Shields at 60%, his tactical officer Kate Rogers reported. They're targeting our power generators. Evasive pattern delta. All platforms activate countermeasures. Near Neptune, Commander Beth Sullivan led her fleet of converted civilian ships in an attack that would have made conventional military strategists weep. Her ships were slow, poorly armed, and had almost no armor. But they had one advantage: the Council wasn't expecting them. All ships, this is Commander Sullivan. Remember, we only need to survive long enough for one good shot. Make it count. Her convoy of 40 ships accelerated toward a Council carrier that had broken formation to investigate a sensor ghost. The carrier's crew probably thought it was a minor patrol issue. By the time they realized they were facing an armed fleet, Beth's ships were already firing. Missiles and railgun rounds slammed into the carrier's side. Most of the shots bounced harmlessly off the shields, but a few lucky hits struck weak points. One missile penetrated the carrier's hangar bay just as fighters were launching, causing a secondary explosion that crippled the ship's main engines. "Target is damaged," Beth's tactical officer yelled. "But we've got incoming. 3 destroyers moving to intercept." "All ships scatter," Beth ordered. "Get to the fallback positions." Her fleet broke apart, each ship heading in a different direction. The Council destroyers pursued, but the civilian ships were surprisingly fast when running for their lives. Beth watched as 2 of her ships took direct hits and exploded, their crews never knowing what killed them. The sacrifice bought time for the others to escape. Back near Earth, the main battle was becoming a nightmare of explosions and weapons fire. The Council fleet, despite losing 40 ships in the opening minutes, still had over 260 vessels. They were organizing now, bringing their full military might against the human forces. Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the Valiant, watching the tactical display as human ships fought desperately against overwhelming odds. Every few seconds, another blue dot representing a human ship would flicker and disappear, but the red dots marking Council vessels were disappearing too. "Their formation is adapting," Amy reported. "They're grouping into defensive clusters and sending squadrons to hunt our ships. Tell all units to stay mobile. We can't match them in a straight fight, so we hit and run. Use the asteroid fields, use the planets for cover, make them work for every kill." The Valiant shook as enemy fire struck their shields. Warning alarms blared across the bridge, and damage reports started coming in from engineering. They were taking a beating, but they were still in the fight. "Return fire all batteries," Jack ordered. "Target that cruiser at heading 270. The Valiant's weapons blazed, sending plasma bolts and missiles toward the enemy ship. Their shots hit the Council cruiser's shields, causing them to flare and weaken. Other human ships saw the opening and added their fire. Together they managed to overwhelm the shields and tear into the hull beneath. The cruiser listed to one side, trailing atmosphere and debris. "Good shooting," Jack said, "but we need to keep moving. Amy, plot us a course behind the moon. We'll use it for cover and regroup." Before Amy could respond, a new contact appeared on the sensors. Dr. Alan Hayes' transport had arrived from Earth, carrying the quantum disruptor. The small ship was completely unarmed and defenseless, racing through a battlefield toward the Valiant. "Get me a comlink to that transport," Jack ordered immediately. Alan's face appeared on the screen, looking terrified but determined. "Commander Morrison, I have the device. Where do you want me to dock?" "Hangar Bay 3. We'll clear you a path. Amy, tell all nearby ships to provide cover for that transport. It's carrying our best weapon." 6 human fighters broke off from their engagements and formed up around Alan's transport, protecting it as Council ships tried to intercept. One fighter took a direct hit and exploded, but the others kept firing, keeping the enemy at bay just long enough for the transport to reach the Valiant's hangar. Jack rushed down to the hangar bay, leaving Amy in command of the bridge. He arrived just as the transport was landing, its hull scorched from near misses. Alan stumbled out, his face pale and sweating. "Is the device intact?" Jack asked. "Yes, but Commander, I have to warn you again. This thing is completely untested. The power requirements are enormous. If we fire it, we'll drain the ship's main systems. We'll be helpless for at least 90 seconds, maybe longer." Jack looked at the strange device being unloaded from the transport. It didn't look like much, just a collection of machinery and glowing crystals. But if Alan's theories were correct, it could destroy Council ships in ways they couldn't defend against. "How long to install it?" 30 minutes if we rush. Maybe 20 if we're really lucky. You have 15. Get it done." Alan nodded and started shouting orders to the engineering crews. Jack returned to the bridge where the battle was still raging. The space around Earth had become a graveyard of destroyed ships from both sides. Debris fields made navigation dangerous, and emergency beacons from damaged vessels filled the communications channels with desperate calls for help. "Status report," Jack demanded as he took his command chair. "We're down to 32 operational warships," Amy said, her voice tight. "The Council has lost approximately 60 vessels total, but they still outnumber us heavily. Captain Stone's defense grid at Jupiter is down to 40% strength. Commander Sullivan's convoy has scattered, but most survived their engagement." Jack did the math in his head. They were losing this fight. For a single heartbeat, nothing happened. The quantum disruptor hummed with stored energy, and Jack Morrison held his breath, wondering if Alan's weapon would work, or if they had just wasted their best chance at victory. Every person on the bridge of the Valiant watched the massive Council flagship through the view screen, waiting. Then reality itself seemed to bend. A wave of distorted space erupted from the Valiant and washed over Vorash's flagship. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The massive alien vessel began to shimmer and twist as if it were being viewed through broken glass. Its hull plating rippled like water, then started to crack along impossible angles that hurt to look at. "It's working," Alan Hayes shouted from engineering, his voice barely audible over the alarms. "The quantum field is collapsing the molecular bonds holding their ship together." The Council flagship's shields flickered and died. Atmosphere vented from dozens of breaches as the hull fractured. Inside, Vorash and his crew of 3,000 experienced a horrifying death as their ship literally tore itself apart at the molecular level. Metal twisted decks collapsed and the massive vessel began breaking into pieces. "My God," Lieutenant Amy Parker whispered, watching the destruction with wide eyes, but the quantum disruptor's effect didn't stop with the flagship. The field spread outward, a cascading wave of destruction that caught 15 more Council ships in its path. Each vessel experienced the same fate, their hulls fracturing and breaking apart as the quantum bonds holding them together failed. Jack watched in amazement as 16 enemy ships were destroyed in less than 30 seconds. The Council fleet, which had been pressing their attack with overwhelming confidence, suddenly fell into complete chaos. Ships broke formation, commanders shouted conflicting orders, and panic spread through the alien forces. "Target destroyed," Amy reported, her voice shaking with disbelief. "Vorash's flagship is gone. We actually did it." But the celebration on the bridge was cut short by a series of urgent alarms. The quantum disruptor had drained every system on the Valiant. Main power was offline, weapons were dead, shields were down, and life support was running on emergency batteries. Engineering, I need power now, Jack demanded. But he already knew what the answer would be. Main systems are completely drained, Commander. We're rebooting the reactors, but it will take at least 2 minutes. We're completely defenseless until then. Jack looked at the tactical display, which was running on backup power. The Council fleet was in chaos, yes, but they still had over 200 ships. And now those ships were starting to notice that the Valiant was floating dead in space, unable to move or fight back. Incoming fire detected, Amy said, her voice tight. Multiple ships are targeting us. Evasive maneuvers, Jack ordered, even though he knew it was pointless. Helm's not responding, sir. We have no power to the engines. Jack gripped the arms of his command chair and watched as enemy fire streaked toward his ship. This was it. They had killed Vorash and hurt the Council badly, but now they were going to pay the price. He thought of Sophie one more time, hoping she would understand why he did what he did. Then the miracle happened. Ships appeared from everywhere. Human vessels that had been scattered across the solar system, fighting their own desperate battles, suddenly changed course and raced toward the Valiant. They positioned themselves between the defenseless flagship and the incoming Council fire. Using their own hulls as shields, "Sir, we're receiving transmissions from multiple vessels," Amy said, her voice breaking with emotion. "The entire fleet is moving to protect us." Captain Eric Stone's voice came through the comm system, calm and determined despite the chaos. "Valiant, this is Stone. Hold tight. We've got you covered." Eric's remaining ships from Jupiter had arrived, their weapons blazing as they engaged the Council vessels targeting the Valiant. Commander Beth Sullivan's converted civilian ships joined the fight, their improvised weapons firing desperately to keep the enemy at bay. Jack watched as human ships took hit after hit, protecting the Valiant while its systems came back online. One destroyer positioned itself directly in front of a Council plasma barrage, meant for the Valiant's bridge. The destroyer's shields failed, its hull was breached, and the ship began breaking apart. But it had bought them precious seconds. Main power restored, the engineering team reported. Bringing all systems back online, the Valiant shuddered as its engines fired up again. Shields flickered to life, weapons came online, and suddenly they were back in the fight. Jack didn't waste a second. All batteries fire at will. Target any Council ship within range. And somebody get me a fleet-wide channel. Amy worked her controls frantically. "Channel open, sir." Jack's voice boomed across every human ship in the solar system. "This is Commander Morrison. Vorash is dead. Their command structure is broken. Now we press the advantage. All ships coordinate fire on enemy clusters. Show them what happens when you mess with humanity." The human fleet, despite its losses and damage, rallied around the Valiant. They had seen what the quantum disruptor could do, had watched their commander fly into certain death and survive. Morale soared, and suddenly every human ship fought with renewed determination. The Council fleet, leaderless and demoralized, tried to regroup. A being named Salkar, who had been Vorash's second in command, took control and attempted to restore order. But the damage was done. The Council ships, which had operated with perfect coordination before, were now making mistakes and hesitating. At Jupiter, Eric Stone finally had to give the order he had been dreading. "All platforms, prepare to evacuate. Our defenses are down to 20%. We can't hold this position." Kate Rogers, his chief engineer, looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Sir, if we abandon the platforms, the enemy will control this entire sector." "I know," Eric said quietly. "But our people matter more than equipment. Get everyone off those platforms and onto the ships. We'll regroup and find another way to fight." The Jupiter defense grid, which had fought so bravely and destroyed so many enemy vessels, was finally overrun. But Eric's forces managed to evacuate most of the personnel before the platforms were destroyed. They retreated toward the inner system, linking up with other human forces for one final stand around Earth. Commander Beth Sullivan's convoy had taken severe casualties. Of the 40 civilian ships she had led into battle, only 18 remained operational. But those 18 had accounted for the destruction of 7 Council vessels, a ratio that no military analyst would have predicted. "Status report," Beth asked her tactical officer as they moved to join the main fleet. "Shields at 30%, weapons at 60%, hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. We're holding together, but barely." Beth nodded, proud of her crew and her ships. They had been civilians just days ago, farmers and miners and teachers. Now they were warriors, and they had proven that humans could fight back against impossible odds. The battle raged for another 4 hours. The space around Earth became so filled with debris that navigation was treacherous. Both sides had taken horrific losses, but neither would back down. The Council was determined to punish humanity for its defiance. Humanity was fighting for its very existence. On Earth, President Kevin Hughes watched the battle from the command center, feeling helpless. He could see the casualty reports coming in, see the list of ships destroyed growing longer by the minute. Thousands of people were dying up there, fighting to protect the planet below. "Mr. President," General Paul Hendricks said quietly, "the fleet is down to 38 operational vessels. They can't sustain this much longer." "I know," Hughes said, his voice heavy, "but what choice do we have? If they retreat, the Council will start bombarding the planet." Admiral Lisa Carter was studying the tactical displays when she noticed something. "Wait, look at the Council fleet's positioning. They're pulling back." Everyone in the command center turned to look at the screens. She was right. The Council ships were slowly withdrawing from Earth's immediate orbital space, consolidating into a tighter defensive formation. "What are they doing?" Hughes asked. "I think they're reassessing," Carter said slowly. "They expected an easy victory. Instead, they've lost over 100 ships and their fleet commander. They're not sure what to do next." Aboard the Valiant, Jack was seeing the same thing. The Council fleet was still enormous, still powerful, but it was no longer pressing the attack with the same aggression. The aliens were hesitating, and in battle, hesitation could be fatal. "Amy, pull up casualty figures for both sides," Jack ordered. The numbers appeared on his screen, and they were staggering. Humanity had started the battle with 80 combat vessels. Now they had 38 still able to fight. But the Council had come with 300 ships and now had fewer than 200 operational. They had lost a third of their fleet to what they considered a primitive species. "They're scared," Jack said suddenly, understanding what he was seeing. "They've never faced resistance like this before. Every other species they conquered surrendered easily. But we've bloodied their nose, killed their commander, and shown we're willing to die fighting. They don't know how to handle that. So what do we do?" Amy asked. Jack thought for a moment, then made a decision that went against every tactical instinct. "We press the attack." The pursuit lasted another hour before Commander Jack Morrison finally gave the order to break off. The human fleet was exhausted, their ships held together by emergency repairs, and the sheer determination of their crews. Pushing any further would risk losing vessels to mechanical failure rather than enemy fire. "All ships, cease pursuit and return to Earth orbit," Jack commanded, his voice hoarse from hours of shouting orders. "We've done enough for today." The battered human fleet slowly turned back toward home, leaving the Council forces to flee toward the edge of the solar system. Jack watched them go on the tactical display, 38 blue dots representing humanity's survivors, and roughly 90 red dots showing what remained of the Council's once mighty armada. "They're jumping to faster than light speed," Lieutenant Amy Parker reported from her station. "All remaining Council ships are leaving the system." A cheer erupted across the bridge of the Valiant. Crew members who had been silent and focused for hours suddenly embraced each other, laughing and crying at the same time. They had survived. Against all odds, against the most powerful force in the known galaxy, they had survived. But Jack couldn't bring himself to celebrate. He was staring at another display, one showing the casualty figures. 42 human ships destroyed, over 14,000 military personnel dead. Countless more injured, 3 colonies heavily damaged. Earth's orbital infrastructure was in ruins. "Commander?" Amy said softly, noticing his expression. "We won." "Did we?" Jack asked quietly. He gestured to the casualty list. "Look at what it cost us, and you know they'll be back." Amy was quiet for a moment, then she touched his shoulder gently. "But we're still here. Earth is still here. Your daughter is still safe. That's what matters." Jack closed his eyes and nodded. She was right. The cost had been terrible, but the alternative would have been extinction. He took a deep breath and straightened up. There was still work to do. "Open a channel to President Hughes," he said. The president's face appeared on the screen moments later. Kevin Hughes looked like he had aged 10 years in the last few hours. His eyes were red, his face drawn, but there was relief written across his features. Commander Morrison, Hughes said. I just received the reports. The Council fleet has retreated. Yes, sir. For now. But we both know this isn't over. I know. But for today, we've earned the right to breathe. Bring your people home, Commander. They've earned some rest. The channel closed, and Jack gave orders for the fleet to begin rescue operations. There were escape pods scattered throughout the battlefield. Survivors from destroyed ships who needed to be picked up. Every life they could save mattered now more than ever. Captain Eric Stone's voice came through the comm. Valiant, this is Stone. My ship's taken heavy damage, requesting permission to dock for emergency repairs. Permission granted, Captain. Welcome home. As Eric's battered vessel limped toward the Valiant, Commander Beth Sullivan reported in as well. Morrison, this is Sullivan. My convoy is down to 12 ships, and most of those are barely functional. We need major repairs. Get your people to the nearest station, Beth. You did incredible work out there. We just did what needed doing, Beth replied, her voice heavy with emotion. Sir, I lost 28 ships and their crews, people who trusted me to bring them home. You gave them a chance to fight for something that mattered, Jack said firmly. Without your convoy, we would have lost this battle. Those people died as heroes, Beth. Never forget that. The hours that followed were a blur of activity. Medical teams worked frantically to treat the wounded. Engineering crews assessed the damage to surviving ships. Rescue operations continued throughout the debris field, searching for survivors. And everywhere, people tried to process what had just happened. On Earth, the planet erupted in celebration. News of the Council fleet's retreat spread rapidly, and people poured into the streets. In cities across the world, humans who had been preparing for the end suddenly found themselves celebrating survival. Strangers embraced, tears flowed freely, and for a brief moment all of humanity was united in joy and relief. In her bunker in California, 8-year-old Sophie Morrison watched the news with her mother. The screen showed footage of the space battle, of human ships fighting against impossible odds. Sophie didn't fully understand everything that was happening, but she knew her father was up there somewhere. Is Daddy okay? She asked, looking up at her mother with worried eyes. Her mother, who had been holding her breath for hours, finally smiled. Yes, sweetheart. I just got word. He's safe. Sophie threw her arms around her mother and cried, all the fear and tension of the past few days pouring out at once. Around them, other families in the bunker were having similar moments, relief and joy mixing with grief for those who wouldn't be coming home. Aboard the Valiant, Dr. Alan Hayes stood in what remained of his laboratory, staring at the quantum disruptor. The device had saved humanity, but it was now a burned-out wreck, its power cells completely depleted and its quantum crystals shattered from the strain. Can you rebuild it? Jack asked, standing in the doorway. Alan turned, looking exhausted but satisfied. Eventually. But it will take months, maybe years, and we'll need resources we don't currently have. That device pushed our technology to its absolute limits. But it's possible? Yes. And now that we know it works, we can improve the design. Make it more efficient, more powerful. Alan paused, then added quietly, We'll need it. The Council won't make the same mistakes twice. Jack nodded grimly. I know. Get started as soon as you can. We'll give you whatever resources you need. In the Earth Command Center, President Hughes was meeting with his military leaders and civilian advisors. The mood was complex, celebration mixed with the grim reality of what lay ahead. The casualty reports are still coming in, General Paul Hendricks said, his voice heavy. Final numbers look like 42 ships destroyed, over 14,000 dead, and 23,000 wounded. 3 outer colonies took heavy damage. The space station network around Earth is at 30% capacity. And our industrial capability? Hughes asked. Admiral Lisa Carter pulled up a chart. Damaged but intact. We can rebuild the fleet, but it will take time. At least 6 months to replace what we lost, assuming we dedicate all available resources to military production. Do it, Hughes ordered. The Council will be back. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month, but they will be back. And next time they'll bring even more ships. One of the civilian advisors, a woman named Helen Price, spoke up. Mr. President, we need to consider the economic impact. Shifting to total military production will cause shortages, unemployment in civilian sectors, and significant hardship for our people. I understand, Hughes said, but there won't be an economy at all if the council comes back and we're not ready. We have to prioritize survival over comfort. The meeting continued for hours, planning for an uncertain future. They discussed building more ships, developing new weapons, fortifying the colonies, and establishing early warning systems at the edge of the solar system. Every decision was made with the knowledge that the council would return. 3 days after the battle, Jack Morrison finally had time to return to Earth. He took a shuttle down to California, where Sophie was waiting at a military base with her mother. When he walked through the arrival gate, Sophie broke free from her mother's hand and ran to him. "Daddy," she screamed, throwing herself into his arms. Jack caught her and held her tight, feeling tears stream down his face. All the fear, all the stress, all the death he had witnessed, it all came crashing down on him at once. He had survived. He had protected his daughter and his species. For now, that was enough. "I was so scared," Sophie whispered against his chest. "I thought you weren't coming back." "I promised I would, didn't I?" Jack said softly. "And I always keep my promises." They stood there for a long moment, father and daughter, while the world celebrated around them. Finally, Sophie pulled back and looked up at him with her serious 8-year-old expression. "Daddy, are the bad aliens going to come back?" Jack thought about lying, about telling her everything would be fine, but Sophie deserved the truth. "Probably, sweetheart. But we'll be ready for them. And no matter what happens, we'll face it together." Sophie nodded, accepting this with the resilience that children somehow possess. "Okay, but next time can you beat them faster?" "I don't like being scared." Jack laughed despite himself. "I'll do my best." Over the following weeks, humanity began the long process of rebuilding and preparing. The space station network was repaired. New ships were laid down in orbital shipyards. The colonies that had been damaged received aid and resources. And everywhere, people talked about the battle, about how humanity had faced extinction and fought back. Captain Eric Stone was promoted to admiral and given command of the rebuilt Jupiter defense grid. Commander Beth Sullivan received a medal for valor and was assigned to train new recruits in unconventional warfare tactics. Dr. Alan Hayes received unlimited funding and resources to continue his quantum weapons research. And Jack Morrison, the man who had killed Vorash and saved Earth, was given command of the entire human defense fleet. It was a position he had never wanted, but one he accepted because someone had to do it. The council would return.